In order to make the most of today's session, we've included a set of polls. These polls will help us to understand your thoughts and your challenges while planning ahead. We will request you to take part in these polls as and when you see them appearing on your screens. Towards the end of the webinar, we will also have a Q&A session. So in case any questions come to mind during the session, please share them through the Q&A tab, and we will address them at the end of the session as much as possible. So the e-commerce boom. Obviously, we've all seen how things have developed, certainly during the COVID. But I thought what we would do is go back on some background pre-COVID and obviously pre-2020. If we look at, I guess, the e-commerce globally, e-commerce is the engine of the global retail growth. In 2017, the e-commerce industry came to the fore when it surpassed 10% of all global retail sales. In 2018, e-commerce reached a $2.2 trillion market, and it was expanding at an annual growth rate of 24%, 4 times faster than the global retail sector. E-commerce is becoming the key growth driver for retail. Its contribution has risen from 7% in 2012 to 39% in 2017 and was expected to pass 50% in 2020. If we look at the MENA region, in MENA, the e-commerce penetration of retail sales averaged 1.9% in 2017, with the GCC at 3%. The United Arab Emirates is the most advanced e-commerce market in the region, with a penetration rate of 4.2%, similar to that of Turkey and Brazil. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia closely behind at 3.8%. And if we look at e-commerce growth, in 2017, the MENA e-commerce market reached $8.3 billion, with an average annual growth rate of 25%. E-commerce in the region has been growing slightly ahead of the global average. If we then look at the UAE in a bit more detail, the UAE's e-commerce landscape is defined by its demographic profile and high income level, with a high percentage of digital native young adults between the ages of 20 to 39. Millennials and Generation Z are considered an influential consumer base for e-commerce adoption. The UAE shopper is among the top spenders online. In the wider Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia region, the UAE represents the biggest annual spend per online shopper at over $1,600. When we look at funding startups for e-commerce businesses, in 2018, 366 MENA-based startups raised a total of $893 million in funding, a 31% increase from 2017, which saw $679 million. The UAE remains the most active in attracting funding, with UAE headquarter startups gathering 30% of all deals and 70% of total funding. This is attributed to the continued government support, corporate venture interest, and growing investor appetite for startups. If we look at some background statistics for the UAE, now in 2020, revenue in the e-commerce market is projected to reach $7.5 billion in 2021. By 2025, we're expecting to see an amount totaling $111 billion. The market's largest segment in e-commerce is the fashion industry, and this is projected to be over a $2.2 billion market in 2021. User penetration is at 69% in 2021 and expected to slightly decline to 66% in 2025. And finally, the average spend, as I mentioned before, it's over $1,000 per individual. I'd like to introduce our first speaker today. So Scott Hoop is on the line. Scott, would you like to join in?
Hi, Gavin, how are you?
I'm very well. Thank you very much for joining us, Scott. I appreciate it. Scott, do you want to just give an introduction about yourself for the listeners?
Yeah, sure. So I'm American, but I've been living outside the United States for around 25 years. Spent 10 years in Paris, France, and then the last 15 years in the UAE. In 2011, I started a venture capital firm with four other guys called Zebic Venture Partners. We did early stage consumer related investments in the e-commerce and digitally enabled business sector in the very early days of VC here in the UAE. And I'm currently running one of our portfolio companies as the COO, and it's called Family Souk Ventures. And Family Souk Ventures operates an omni-channel business that is focused on child and parenting products from 0 to 6. We sell direct to consumer online, region wide. We have operations in Riyadh and Saudi Arabia and also in Dubai. And we also are a B2B reseller. So we have 18 exclusive licenses that are MENA-wide licenses that we distribute and sell to our competitors, which is sometimes people find that to be an interesting model, but we're significantly focused on building categories of product, which in the past haven't had great traction in the region, which has really started to happen in the last 5 years.
Great. Obviously, yeah, great for the introduction and sort of highlight some of the international experience. I guess one of the questions that I have, and I think it's quite prevalent at the moment, has there been an e-commerce boom, particularly in the region, and maybe what have you seen that's driven this?
Yes, I would say in the last 5 years specifically, there's been a significant boom. Some more sector related, such as travel, certainly our sector, baby and child, marketplace platforms for consumer products. I think those are the main ones that I've seen in terms of really getting traction with consumers. Things like banking services and things like that are more fintech related, and they were really the earliest to market in providing ease of use and as well as government services to get people comfortable with transacting online. When we first started investing, it was funny. It was very difficult to actually transact online because even the governments throughout the region weren't transacting online. Once consumers started to transact with the governments online, kind of the path to e-commerce became much easier.
What challenges, I guess, do you think e-commerce companies are facing the UAE? And for the listeners, I also am going to ask Devere pretty much the same question. So probably more from your perspective on this first, Scott.
Yeah. For us, it's four things that we see across all of our companies, but specifically in Family Souk, and from talking to our colleagues at other e-commerce companies. High level, last mile customer service is an issue. It requires investments by most companies to make sure that they're offering a high level of service vis-a-vis after an order occurs, what happens? How seamless is that to a customer receiving their order? Availability of products. If you run a marketplace with several 100,000 products on your website, what is the availability of those products to consumers so that you can deliver quickly? And I would say last is just depth of experience management and teams that have worked in e-commerce, maybe even potentially failed, which is there's no harm in failure, but experience of running these kind of companies and the demands that are entailed.
Yeah, I suppose failure is all part of it when you're talking an SME. I mean, that's how you learn and develop further for your next venture. You mentioned there that your operation is obviously in Dubai and Riyadh, so you have a bit of sort of international expansion there. I guess other than the UAE, and for some of the listeners, what are some of the other maybe GCC markets that are interesting for growth? And again, what challenges do you find you're facing going into those markets?
So Saudi is our biggest market in terms of size of our revenue part. It's pushing 60%. The smaller countries on the western part of the Gulf, such as Kuwait, Qatar, Oman is a fairly small market in terms of consumer uptake. Are interesting, Bahrain as well, but nothing has the scale and size that the UAE and Saudi, of course, have. We also are seeing a lot of interest in the stands. So Pakistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan are interesting markets for us as well that have a sphere of influence outside of the UAE in terms of distribution. Yeah.
Now, you sort of talked about, I guess, logistics there. what's, and again, I'm going to probably ask Maureen a similar question, but you talked about last mile logistics, and what are you finding, I guess, how are you controlling that? What are the challenges with the last mile logistics piece?
So around 6 years, we just totally gave up on third-party providers and built our own in-house capability. So we do all of our own delivery.
Interesting.
Yeah, we find that, and part of it has to do with the sector we're in. So the consumers we deal with, new families that are having children, sometimes for the first time, are a bit more needy than someone that's waiting for just a mobile phone or a computer to be delivered to their home. Um,
Okay.
so they
Yeah.
want preciseness and conciseness and an understanding of
Yeah.
the products that they're buying because they're generally quite, I'll just be frank, fragile consumers. And
Yeah.
and for that reason, our type of customers require more in terms of the service levels we desire, or they desire
Mm.
rather, we can provide. And yeah, so we've ultimately built our own logistics network. We do all of our own deliveries.
Yeah.
In Saudi Arabia, we've hired women drivers who do all of our deliveries, et cetera. So yeah,
Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
it's the most challenging part of what we do is the third party logistics. It's just not
And,
possible for us.
and you sort of mentioned there that you sort of have different channels with
Mm.
relation to your product, and you have distribution rights. What do you think? I guess as an e-commerce business, but having a distribution arm to it, how important do you feel that is? Maybe comparative to others that don't have that arm.
So for us, it is security of supply. So we deal with third-party sellers as well that operate on
Mm.
our side as a marketplace, but a lot of people are very thinly stocked, and that provides issues because unless there's good transparency all the way to the end consumer of the actual availability of goods, that can create challenges for someone that's operating a pure marketplace, which is why we
Yeah.
moved a bit away from that model because you may be able to sell something online, but maybe someone else already sold that online, and then suddenly it's not available for your platform and your customer. So we just
Right.
found that to be very risky to our business model.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And when you come to your technology, because obviously e-commerce is built on technology, your back office, your front end. I know we've spoken before in the past. What are some of the largest challenges you've faced?
Integration of tools that have solid local support. So all of the tools are available in the UAE as they would be available anywhere else throughout the region. But
Yeah.
having local support in terms of technical support, I mean, a lot of the tools that we use have technical support in India, or they have technical support in Turkey, or in Sri Lanka, or in the UK. Many in the UK actually, which is
Yes.
challenging when you've got time differences, time changes, etc. So recently we've put in an ERP system and we've chosen a local group here that can support us
Yep.
locally. We have no problem working virtually as a virtual business, but it's just having that technical capability closer to us and not trying to track it down all the time is
Yep.
something that is a bit lacking here.
And I think finally, before we move on to Maureen,
Mm.
how important is are payment gateways or a similar type of product to your type of business, to an e-commerce business?
The country and the region need more payment solutions that are lower cost, faster to settlement, and provide more flexibility from the banking institutions that offer them
Yep.
to the types of payment solutions that consumers want. It's a consumer-driven business in the sense that they want to be able to pay us and other e-commerce companies in various ways, and that's not always possible. And that sometimes gets frustrating just because those gateways or possibilities for payment are not offered in the region.
Great. Well, look, Scott, thanks so much for your time. I'll get you to join back a little bit later when we come
Yep.
to the Q&A, but really
Pleasure.
appreciate it. So thanks very much.
Pleasure.
We'll get our next speaker, Maureen. Maureen, if you would like to join us.
Hi there. How are you?
Hey, Maureen. I'm very well. Yourself?
Good, thanks. Good.
Do you want to give a quick back job on your business, Kuwait somewhere?
Yes, hi. So I moved to Dubai in 2000, and it became very apparent that the need for UV protection in the region with being at the beach and the pool 360 days a year. So I developed a swimwear line that was protection of UV for my family and myself. And it soon became, very popular with all my friends. So I decided to start Coega Sunwear. And it has also, because coverage for UV is also something that people are looking for a little more modest coverage. It has sort
Yes.
of developed into, a UV and modest swimwear range. We started distributing to one location back in 2003. And now we are in over 100 different retail outlets within the GCC. We
Great.
have partnered with Disney and Marvel. We do a co-branding with them and a whole line of that. We've also just signed a contract with Warner Brothers. We'll be doing some co-branding with their ranges. And we are the Expo licensee for the Expo swimwear line as well. So, yeah.
Fantastic. And look, I think it's great that a homegrown business has been able to necessarily, do that and develop it out. So I think all congratulations to you and your team. I know, and I've known you for quite a while, so I know there's different sort of revenue streams, and we've talked about this beforehand. But to your perspective, why is it important to have multiple revenue streams in terms of for an e-commerce distribution type business?
Mm-hmm. Well, we found that actually the majority of our sales are through brick and mortar retail locations. So, and e-commerce is a part of that. We have our own e-commerce, and we also use some other e-commerce platforms in the region. And I believe that having a variety of distribution networks is very advantageous, because you can target all those different consumers who are going to, some people don't want to buy online, they want to feel it, touch it, try it on, especially for a swimwear brand. It was interesting to hear that you had mentioned that fashion is one of the biggest growers. So I'm quite interested to see how that goes. But yeah, I mean, if you want to really reach out to a number of different people, then having all these platforms is good. And also it helps you to go into regions where you may not have the retail locations, which is very advantageous as well.
Now, I know in speaking to yourself that you mentioned there, you've grown your business organically. I know that a lot of other companies, particularly in e-commerce, they'll raise capital and, maybe sort of explode it that way. Have you ever considered that, and what's been the challenge with facing that? I'm sort of interested to know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I started the company, I wasn't in a rush. It was just something I wanted to grow steadily and increasing step by step. And I always had people say, "Oh, you should get some funding and you should increase this way." And I'm like, "No, I just want to take an approach, because I feel that, you need years in out in industry for people to trust the brand and to know the brand on its quality. And I feel that time is what helps to build the trust, that you will deliver the same thing year after year after year after year, and your quality is always there. So we haven't really experienced any sort of issues with not taking on funding. We have reinvested the money every year. We just keep reinvesting the money back in to help ourselves grow. And for me, really, growing the business is not just about the money. It's about building a reputable, quality brand that will stand the test of time, and not just kind of come out with a bang and then be gone the next few seasons.
I think that echoes probably Scott's comments around having substantial knowledge about the the industry and the e-commerce, and you build off the back of that. Just out of interest, what other markets are you actually in? I know you said you're in GCC, but you sell into other markets within the MENA region.
We're selling to KSA. We're selling Bahrain, Oman, Qatar, Kuwait. We're also selling in Jordan, Egypt. Australia, through our online platform. We do sell a bit to Europe. We get the odd, the odd orders from there, but nothing sort of as a mainstream. Yeah.
So very much through aggregators.
At this point, yes.
I'll go to a couple of other questions, just conscious of time. With relation to pitfalls with consumer penetration, so trying to retain consumers, what do you feel are some of the pitfalls that maybe other business owners should be aware, or other e-commerce platform businesses should find?
With customer penetration, I think for us, you want to try and penetrate as much of the market as you possibly can using various avenues and channels. However, I feel that you always want to make sure you are sending the same message about who your brand is and what they are. Because if you try and capture every segment of the market in degrees of, high fashion, like high fashion and that sort of thing, then I feel like if you try and move too much out of your segment, then you're going to devalue your brand, and people are not going to trust your brand anymore.
Well, I think that point is quite interesting when we come to Devere, because I think he's got some commentary on that as well. So it'll be interesting to hear that. Just lastly, I'll sort of move forward a little bit. When you're again looking at, I guess, your business, what are the current challenges from a financial perspective that maybe either your current bank is not assisting you with, or what sectors could really help? What sort of type of products?
I think for us, one thing, I mean, we've always just managed to stay within our sort of, the finance that we can support ourselves with.
Yes.
But I would say one of the things would be really nice to have is that short-term cash flow to help inject a little bit when, because we work on seasons, so we tend to have big outflows, and then we're kind of waiting for the money to come in. So that short-term cash flow, injection would be very beneficial. Of course, at a very reasonable rate, because that's the main thing.
Of course, right? For
rate.
For an SME, every percentage point makes a big difference, right? So I fully understand that. Look, Maureen, thank you very much. I'll get you to come back again afterwards, and we'll go through some of the questions. Just before we get Devere to join, I'm just going to get some of the answers to some of the polls that obviously we got some of the guests to complete. So we'll probably be able to have a look at some of those. And I think, so just to give you an idea, there was a bit of a broad sort of analysis from that. I think most people, when it came to the first question, what were some of the pieces they're looking for? Was it funding? What were some of the challenges? Funding, increased competition, international expansion. It's actually a bit of a mixed bag, to be honest, in amongst all of those. I think the interesting one is when it comes to technology, the biggest standout there that people are facing is finding a reputable and reliable technology partner, whether that is building of their technology or developing it further. And then when we look at the suite of services, I guess, that people are looking for from their business, again, to Maureen's point, maybe to Scott's point, there's a bit of a variation between payment gateways, loans, shorter term type products. So again, pretty interesting. And then finally, we asked about influencers. Do they sort of add value? And we've got quite a high response that said yes. So again, that might be something of a question mark that we'll cover off later. So I think what we want to do is invite Devere Forster. Devere Forster is from Commerce City. Devere, you with us?
I'm here.
Excellent. Yeah, no problems at all. Thanks, Devere. So Devere, do you want to just explain about Commerce City? I think it's really interesting. It aligns to all of the growth that's going on. So over to you.
Well, first of all, let me start to say I'm Irish. It's St. Patrick's Day, so for
Oh yes,
anybody
happy
who
St.
may be
Patrick's Day.
Irish, top of the morning to you all. Um, uh, Gavin, a little bit of background on me. I've been in e-commerce for 21 years, so I'm a little bit of an old hand at this. Majority of that was in the UK, but I did move to the Middle East 10 years ago this month to Al Shaya to launch their e-commerce capabilities for the GCC, Russian, Turkish markets. In Alpha Tame, the Alpha Tames run IKEA and M&S, where again I launched e-commerce for those for that institution. And then I spent 3.5 years up until September of last year in Thailand. I'm responsible for omni-channel and e-commerce for Central Group, which is the big retail conglomerate, $15 billion retail business in Thailand, Vietnam, and they run the high-end department stores across Europe. So moving on to what Dubai Commerce City is and what is being developed. I think for those that don't know, we've just recently launched. It's the first and leading free zone dedicated exclusively to e-commerce, an area covering just over 2 million square feet and an investment of around $1 billion. It's uniquely designed to support new and existing e-commerce businesses across the MENA region. Now, in terms of what's being developed, I like to give the term of Dubai Commerce City as e-com in a box. We're simply just not a free zone, which is typically a landlord and tenant relationship, where you not only get space for an office and warehouse to set up your business, but also all the relevant support services you need to take your business online. Now, other than complete business setup and custom support, Dubai Commerce City also offers e-commerce strategy consulting, guidance on e-commerce regulations in the region, end-to-end logistics solutions inclusive of fulfillment centers and last mile, complete e-commerce platform solutions, digital marketing services, and other support services, including but not limited to photo studios, content translation, call centers, among others. Now, with Dubai Commerce City as a one-stop shop, you can simply cut out the middleman and choose to select a full suite of services that Dubai Commerce City can offer you, or just activate the services of your business that you require on a pay-as-you-go model.
So look, thanks so much for that. And like I said, I know when we spoke, I'm very interested in what it's doing. And I think back to the very first question that I sort of asked Scott around, the e-commerce boom. It's very evident necessarily, not just here, but globally, how much e-commerce has exploded. And obviously COVID, given lockdown and other restrictions, has really, sort of brought that to the forefront. What do you feel is the major issues that I guess the UAE needs to overcome in the e-commerce space, based on obviously your international experiences you've highlighted?
Yeah, like, Scott touched on some of this, and it's great actually. Everybody in e-commerce are facing the same issues here as internationally. I've probably got 6 areas, and 3 of them Scott did cover off. The first one, which he did say, is around payments. There is a preference of consumers in this region to check out using COD or cash on delivery, as opposed to digital payments. Now, it's part cultural, a need to have the order in their hands before they're willing to pay for it. And the other part is security issues. Simply fear of putting personal and credit card detail that could be hacked. And this is the reason why customers continually to favor ordering cash on delivery rather than prepaying using credit cards or debit cards, especially on online stores where they simply have a lack of trust. For example, some websites where they may never have shopped on there before, and this is very prevalent in developing markets where the item may not be authentic, so it could be a fake. Now, when you may be thinking, what is the big issue here? You're still getting an order. Well, the big issues that results from cash and delivery orders is higher returns versus prepaid orders. That's driven by higher failure rates of the courier company delivering the item, from doorstep refusals from the customer, from changes of mind from the customer by the time the order is delivered. Now, this adds significant cost into the supply chain as couriers levy return charges to the retailer, and items may also be damaged whilst out in the courier network. The second issue is around delivery addresses, which has been really driven by the lack of the adoption of the UAE equivalent of the zip code or postcode called Makani. Now, Makani is the official geographical addressing system within the Emirates, and it was initially launched back in 2015. And in October last year, the Dubai municipality announced that it would be expanding this to include every single unit within a building. Now, this system was introduced to improve the accuracy of delivery location, but the issue, however, lays a few people actually know what their unique 10-digit Makani number is. I bet you if I ask you, Gavin, you probably don't know.
No, I don't. No, I don't. I end up with, like I mentioned to you, I end up with a phone call and, you know, on a WhatsApp, send me your location.
Look, adding to this, very, very few websites today ask for the Makani number when entering the delivery details. And this results in the courier companies having to call each and every customer to confirm their delivery location, which only adds cost, and it can become quite annoying to customers who frequently shop online.
Correct.
The third area is customer behavior and delivering an omni-channel experience. Now, we all know the Middle East has a unique culture and a way of life affecting the way business is conducted and how customers act. For example, the mall culture is heavily predominant, and people still prefer to purchase from brick and mortar stores than online retailers. And the challenge, therefore, is how do multi-channel retailers and brands bring online and offline together in an omni-channel experience and solution and a solution for their customers. Now, some simply believe delivering the basic omni-channel features such as click and collect is all that's required to deliver an omni-channel experience. This is way, way far from the truth. You know, customers from retailers expect the following: be able to check an individual store stock availability ahead of visiting the store so they know the actual product is available to purchase and take away from the store, to be able to return an online order back to a store for an instant exchange or refund, not just simply dropping off that online order for it to be processed for a refund days or weeks later, to be able to order online and pay for it in store, or what many call reserve and collect. This allows customers to pre-select products without paying up front, and then to check out for the items in store and only pay for the items that they really do want. Now, this is a real USP for physical retailers because pure play e-tailers cannot offer this service. Again, in stores, customers expect to be able to place an order for an out-of-stock SKU or a non-range SKU, better known as e-ordering. Here, the online channel can support the physical store with a full assortment catalogue, or endless aisle, as is better known in retail, when a store associate can place an e-order on behalf of the customer, and the product can then be delivered to the customer's home or collected in stores at a later date. Customers also look for additional platforms to shop from, outside of just physical stores or online. These additional channels come from social media platforms such as Facebook and Instagram, to using instant messaging platforms such as WhatsApp and Messenger. Now, these chat platforms allow for more personalized and personal shopping experience, where customers can interact with a salesperson asking for advice and recommendations, which is pretty akin to the experience that they receive in store. And finally, using online tech to deliver solutions in store, such as the smart changing room, displaying customer reviews, comparing products, or scanning and buying a product. So a little bit like a self-checkout, so there's no need to queue to pay for the items that you do want. Now, moving into specifically, you know, and I think Gavin touched on this, the choice of online stores in the UAE are simply limited to domestic e-commerce, resulting in domestic e-commerce being very underrepresented in this region. If you look at some of the stats, today cross-border e-commerce in this region accounts for over 70% of total e-commerce. Now, compare this to the global figures, it's more like 50-50. This therefore means that customers here are highly reliant on online stores outside of the UK, using the likes of RMX's Shop and Ship to get an order delivered, or ordering from international sellers on the likes of Amazon.ie to do their everyday online shopping. Now, one of the key reasons for this is simply a limited choice of homegrown online stores, and weak or no online offerings by retailers and brands in this region. Even if they do have an online store, the assortment offering is far from what you find in the offline store, so customers essentially abort their visit and try to find the product on a marketplace platform such as Amazon, Noon, and Namshi. Fifth point is differential pricing from one country to another. Now, this is not a specific issue for the UAE, but a global one. Being able to compare the price of a specific pair of Nike sneakers, for example, across the world has never been easier. And I'm sure many of you watching this webinar have searched the World Wide Web for the best price. And in some cases, you found a cheaper price listed on international websites than here in the UAE. I know I personally have. And yes, you may have to pay higher delivery charges if you're ordering from versus that of a local store. And yes, you may have to wait 5 or 10 days for it to be delivered. But many consumers are motivated to purchase where you can find the lowest price. And last but not least is definitely, this has been touched on by Scott, the lack of experienced talent. As e-commerce is relatively new industry here compared to the likes of Europe and US, the pool of well-experienced e-commerce talent remains very, very shallow. Brands, retailers, and service providers are having to turn to international candidates to fill these specific roles in the e-commerce space, which of course comes at a cost.
So again, I think the good thing there is what you're showing is not only just the UAE, but also internationally, and that adds also symmetry to what maybe Scott and Maureen have already highlighted as well. So I think some really valid points. I think if we just cap on just a couple of the questions before we move to the Q&A, just obviously conscious of time. How can the UAE benefit from this e-commerce boom very quickly, Devere?
You
might be here a while, but I know.
There's two, and thank you for asking this, Gavin. Look, increased trade, because as it opens up, as the whole boom of e-commerce takes place, it really opens up the opportunity for domestic players to sell into international markets. And secondly, and this one, what really excites me is the increased foreign investments that will come from this boom. There's no reason why the UAE, with the launch of Dubai Commerce City, cannot become the global e-commerce hub and replicate what Emirates did for the airline industry by creating an airport hub for connecting cities that are worlds apart. This will help propel the UAE to become the Silicon Valley of the Middle East.
And I was going to say, to top on that, positioning within the world, as we've always said with Emirates, etc., between East, West, and then down to Africa, it's perfect, and therefore it's it's highly aligned for e-commerce. What we'll probably do is we'll move on to the Q&A. Just before I do that, I'll get you to turn your webcam off. I'm just Devere, so thank you very much for joining us. I'm just going to go through some conclusion points just for the listeners, and then we'll go to the Q&A. So I guess just for the listeners, look, there's a number of factors here that we want to conclude about on e-commerce. I think we've talked about, Devere and Scott have, about improved logistics and obviously government initiatives. We talked about consumer adoption on e-commerce. We've also looking at newer initiatives introduced by proactive merchants. Venture capital funding is obviously on the boom and the increase within this area. We're seeing latent demand by a young technology-savvy consumer base. And then finally, a digital-ready marketplace and proactive adoption of newer payment channels by merchants. So we're just going to go to our Q&A. I think if I can get all of the speakers back to join us, and I'm going to go through some questions and answers that people might have. I have quite a few that have come through, so I'll just wait for everybody to join in, and then we can go from there. I think we've just got to get Scott on. While we're waiting, Devere, there's a question coming here while obviously Scott's joining. Devere, how will Dubai Commerce City help SME in scaling up who are looking to set up in DCC? How will DHL and Hellman assist with logistics potentially?
Yeah, sure. Obviously, Nazim, thank you for the question. He's obviously very well aware that we've already announced the tie-up with DHL and Hellman, who essentially have partnered here with Dubai Commerce City. Hellman provide a multi-client warehouse solution, which in this case are really great for SMEs, because SMEs don't want to go in and invest in their own warehouse and invest in people to run those warehouses. So what Hellman with DHL, or sorry, with Dubai Commerce City can do is we offer a pay-as-you-go model in terms of warehousing. So if they want 10 cubic meters, 100 cubic meters, 1,000 cubic meters, in fact, they could take over the whole warehouse. They just purely pay on a pay-as-you-go basis. So as the product goes in, they're paying for the storage just on the amount that they want to put in. Hellman Worldwide Logistics, one of the best warehouse operators in the globally. They will manage then the throughput of the product, the put away, the picking, and then pass it over to DHL to do the last mile in the UAE, and DHL will also manage cross-border if so that the SME may want to use DHL. Now, you know, there is no form of exclusivity. You know, they can pick Fetcher, they can pick RMX, etc., to do last mile. That's their choice. But where Dubai Commerce City can come in is they can either pass over the whole management of their online business to us. We can build an online store for them. We can run the online store for them. We can help them to do all their performance marketing. So be it either pay-per-click activity on Google, affiliate management, any display within social media, we can manage all of that. Okay. So essentially, we can help them scale by taking the work off their hands if they don't have expertise in-house and manage that for them on their behalf.
Thanks, Daveer, and hopefully that's answered Nazim's question. We also have another question, and maybe we'll target this towards to Scott, if that's okay. How do you keep scaling up your business without financing? Bit more of a personal touch, so maybe it's more to do with your venture guys, but how did you invest when you started out your business?
Maybe Maureen's better to answer this one. I mean, I totally agree. I totally agree with her. I mean,
we're handballing it across.
Yeah, we're frugal capitalists, though. I think you know, just in terms of the way we develop Family Souk Ventures and Baby Souk, we've done it on a fracture of the venture capital that other platforms have raised. And, you know, we run a tight operation, keep our costs low, try to invest internally as much as we can. It's more painful and it takes longer, but I think Maureen would agree it's more sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's sometimes it's easy to get caught up in the big flashy offices and putting money where it's not really the best spent here. So you have to really keep an eye on where your money is going. So yeah.
100%.
Question, and I know I sort of touched on this with Daveer, but this is probably more for all of the panel. Is there an oversaturation of aggregators or marketplace platforms in the UAE? And maybe on this one, Scott, I'll start with you and then see what the others sort of say and bounce off.
I would say no, but I would also in that same breath say that I don't necessarily know, even in the case of Amazon, what they stand for to the consumer as a marketplace platform. What are they? You know?
Maureen and Daveer, any comments?
Following up on Scott, look, you know, I've been in e-commerce a long time now. I've seen the board, you know, I've watched Amazon with huge interest from 1994 to where we are today. It's been followed up by obviously Noon in 2016 as two generalist marketplaces. I believe very, very strongly, and with all the experience I've had over the 21 years, there is only real space for two, max 3 generalist marketplaces in each country. You know, in my last role at Essential Group in Thailand, we did a joint venture with JD.com, one of China's leading marketplaces. And they were the number 3 to launch in Thailand behind Lazada's, which is run by Alibaba. It's an Alibaba business, and Shopee. And they had the lead. They only launched in 2014. They had a significant lead. We launched JD Central as part of JV, like I said, in 2018. And they've struggled to play and they've struggled to really dent those two big marketplaces. So we've got Amazon. It's great to see that we've got competition, because competition is good for the end consumer, because it's all, you know, particularly in the e-commerce space, it's all about price. And then they differentiate with all the services that they're added to it. But what I would say is there's plenty of room for specialist marketplaces. So specialist marketplaces in mom and baby, specialist marketplaces in beauty, in home, etc., That's what consumers are looking for, because I tell you what, as a consumer, you are just bombarded with products left, right, and center on the likes of Amazon and Noon. If you really want to try to tailor your product, where in a sector that you've got specific needs for, there's plenty of space today in terms of launching category-specific marketplaces.
Great. So social media has kind of maybe changed also the face of e-commerce. And I asked the question beforehand about, influencers. I think there's 2 points to that. What are some of the best social media channels? And then secondly, influencers, do they actually add value to potential e-commerce platforms? Anybody want to answer the points?
Well, I would say that influencers can add value, but you have to make sure that the influencer is got your target market. It's no sense to just go out there and get the biggest influencer. It's all about making sure that the people that are following them are your target market.
Any other commentary?
I would add that we view social media as somewhat generational, right? I mean, your Facebook user is in a different age demographic than your Snapchat user, than your TikTok user, than your Twitter user, right? So it's really becoming quite segmented in terms of the channels that Instagram, another one, right? That people use to communicate and share information. So, and it really is generational. I mean, when we're trying to reach younger mothers, it is definitely not on Facebook. So,
and if I could add, look, social media is a very, very exciting new channel to add and complement online. Without giving away any trade numbers, our social media, in terms of sales that we generated through social media, Line being the major one, which is Asia's version of WhatsApp, we were generating over 50% of sales through social media as a chat platform versus our online business. And over 50% of what we were generating in all of online. And that's because we introduced things such as chat and shop. So the ability to be able to have that conversation with a store associate, beauty assistant, et cetera, in our department stores. And it comes back to what I was saying earlier, that you bring the offline experience online. You can't do this online. You can do this through social media. The other big push, particularly that came through COVID, was Facebook Live. Everybody has jumped on the bandwagon since. We were one of the very first in Thailand to do this. And it's a little bit bringing TV home shopping of the 90s and early 2000s to your social media platform. So you can interact, you can watch, you can ask questions. They reply to questions just like QVC of the UK. And, that is social commerce as well. So I see social commerce becoming maybe not as big, but very, very close to being as big as your online channel.
Just a couple of more questions that have come through, and I'll sort of talk about this. Scott, you sort of, I know you'd raised, sort of funding. If somebody is a potential investor and they're looking at valuations on some of these e-commerce companies, some of them seem quite, racy, maybe aggressive, maybe overpriced. Is there, what's the consensus from an investor perspective?
In terms of valuation?
Yeah, how they sort of, judging those and feeling, is that actually a right price? And you're smiling with a big smile on your face. So
well, they're not done on EBITDA, I'll tell you that. Multiples of revenue, and consumer lifetime value of the people on their platforms, their consumers. Yeah, those are the two big drivers. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And to Devere's point, management team. A platform with a good management team that knows how to run their operations well will, strike a higher valuation than just pure conceptual, top line revenue.
Okay. Yeah. No problems. I mean, it was one of those where we have some people on the webinar that are also potentially from that side, from an investing side. So certainly interesting questions. One of the questions come in is, how do you see the competition from giants like Amazon and Noon, as you mentioned here? not really. Well, basically put an end to new entrants very quickly. I know you mentioned that if you're into subcategories, there's less of an emphasis on that, but just through sheer size and scale, they can break you down fast.
Well, look, in Amazon and Amazon in any country that they're in have never killed the high street. They've never killed the competition in e-commerce. Yes, they've become big players in the world of commerce. But high street still exists in the UK, it still exists in America and Europe. I tell you what, it will always exist here in the Middle East because it's a hot, humid country. People want to get into the cars and go to the malls for entertainment, for cooling, and to buy. I think the big change will come from as more and more bricks and clicks retailers get omni-channel delivered. Consumers will turn online, they will go to online, they'll select what they want, they won't buy it, but they will then go to the store, like I talked a little bit earlier about reserve and collect. They will go to the store. It'll be a bit like having a personal shopper waiting for you. As I walk in, Mr. Forster, great, I see you're online, here are your items. I can then take them to the changing room, or I can touch, feel it, try and buy it, and then only pay for the items. This is where omni-channel retailers will really, really win. Amazon will never, ever, kill retail per se. Retail is too much. It's part of our life. We want to go out, be inspired, impulse purchase, etc., etc.
And that probably answers maybe one of the other questions that came in is, what does the future look like for 2025? You just sort of mentioned some points there. I guess from, Scott or Maureen, is there any sort of, I don't know, vision that you maybe see, or what you're seeing internationally?
With or without masks?
Yeah.
That's a joke.
Glass ball.
Yeah. I see the more niche online platforms being, because Amazon and Noon, they're just massive sites, and you're just like it was said before, you're just inundated with all these things. So if you're looking for something more fashion, you go to Namshi, or if you're the different sort of idea, I see those more of those. Yeah.
Fair enough. Last two questions that have come in. So one's come in, it says courier and fulfillment companies happen to be quite expensive. I know you've talked about logistics, Scott, specifically for cross-country orders. Do you think that this could affect how e-commerce companies can evolve? Scott, maybe seeing as you spoke about logistics.
I mean, definitely. And there's also the regulatory aspect of product. So there's a lot coming into play in terms of Saudi Arabia, and just the way product is going to be moving into Saudi Arabia versus the way it is now is going to become much more strict in terms of the ability to consolidate orders in Dubai but deliver them in Saudi. It's already in process. Yeah, it's very challenging.
Devere, any comments?
I think we are blessed actually in this region that fulfillment costs, although they may sound expensive to operators here, are low compared to Europe, very, very low compared to the US, a little bit more expensive than Thailand. And there's one thing common when it comes to fulfillment of online orders: labor in this market is cheap, and it will remain cheap because this is the world that we live in. So how you can reduce the impact of costs of the potential going forward is, if you're a multi-channel retailer, is start using your stores as potential warehouses. So particularly, this is very, very applicable to Saudi Arabia, where you don't have to deliver from a central hub in Riyadh to the corner of Saudi Arabia. You take your whole inventory fees from all your stores and treat every single store as a mini warehouse. So whenever you've got a customer living in, say, Jeddah, it looks at the stock availability in the Jeddah store and delivers direct from Jeddah to the consumer. So you're reducing the overall logistics and, more importantly, the lead time. So again, it's a little bit more omni-channel, what we're developing in Thailand, where you can now start promising order to delivery in 2 hours anywhere in the country. So if you are a multi-channel retailer with loads of stores dotted over in the likes of Saudi Arabia, you can start doing that. Again, it starts reducing this cost of fulfillment of that online order to the customer.
Great. Well, look, I think that's all of the questions that have come through. I think it was a really good discussion point, and I think as I sort of probably wrap up, it's, you know, COVID has really rapidly expanded e-commerce, not just in this region, but globally. And I think, you know, for each three of you on here today, you've got some really valid, excellent points. Obviously, great experience, great depth, and hopefully for the listeners, some really, really good feedback that they can take back, whether they're a startup, whether they're, you know, small, medium enterprise, or obviously larger. So I just want to say thank you very much for being part of the webinar today. To each of you, and thank you very much for giving your story as well. So that brings us to the end of the webinar. Obviously, as I mentioned, the National Bank of Fujairah runs these thought leader webinars on roughly a monthly basis. There is a poll just before everybody leaves about upcoming topics that we're going to be looking to discuss. And for those who are interested, if you'd like to complete that poll, it gives us an idea of what the webinar listeners are really engaged or wanting to know further about. Again, from the National Bank of Fujairah, thank you very much for listening to us. Speakers, thank you very much. Stay safe.
Thank you.
And hope to see you all soon. Okay. Thank you
Thanks
very
so much, Kevin. Bye-bye.
Take care.
No worries. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.